I'm CK. It's been a couple of months. I haven't built an FM radio. So I got another one from Amazon. And we'll see what it's like. We'll see how easy it is to put together. We'll see if the documentation includes any radio theory. See how good it might be for a beginner, or whether it's intended for someone to use around their house in general purpose. So we'll put it together and see what it's like. Hope you enjoy it. So let's see what we got in the bubble wrap bag. Got bag of parts. We've got bag of case pieces. Got a speaker. And probably, I'm from the bet man, is some hardware. Yeah, there's a bunch of hardware in there. I'm sure the case is fine. We'll look at that more in depth when we actually get together, when we get around to putting it together. Let's see what this speaker looks like. As you may recall, the last radio I put together, the speaker was an e-waste reclaim with potting material on the terminals. We'll see what this one's like. It's got a QR code on it, which is interesting. Looks new. There's a crack in the ferrite, which is not great. But again, this is not a high fidelity speaker. Let me actually ping this QR code and see where it takes us. And get the camera app up and try and figure out where I put the, there it is. And the QR code takes us to somewhere. Oh, it does. It takes us, this is the build documentation. Huh. "87 megahertz to 108 megahertz, standard FM. Nice schematic. Component list. Welding steps or soldering steps. There's a small, oh, I know what this is. This is that ubiquitous Philips FM tuner chip. We saw that in the Elenco FM radio, I believe. It might have been something else. Then put the resistors, the crystal, big old chip, and some LEDs. And then another potted daughter board. I guess that must be the display board. Yeah, that's the display board. So it's got good pictures. It looks like a fine kit. Let me go back to the top here to the parts list to see if that is the actual Philips tuner mini board. Doesn't RDA 5807 radio module, that's what it is. And again, so that's nice. The build guide is on a QR code on the back of the speaker. That's a good place to put it. There's the LED display. We'll keep that in its bag for now. And here's the PCB board. It's kind of tight. It looks okay, and plating's all through hole, which is unusual for a product this inexpensive and mass-produced, but that's good. The antenna, the pad for the antenna is on both sides. Huh, that's interesting. We'll see how well that takes solder. That's always for me, the biggest problem is getting the antenna to stick USB powered with a couple of components stuck in the cabling. There's the antenna. These are so stiff. You can never, ow, hurts to turn them. IC socket and the STC microcontroller. We've seen these used many different places. A couple of pairs of wire probably for the speaker. I'm going to dump the rest of this out unceremoniously. Somebody's been macrameing with the resistor leads. Those must be the 10Ks. Yeah, those are the 10Ks. There are quite a few 10Ks all over the board. Oh, by the way, the board is marked with all the component values, so that's nice. So even if we didn't have a build guide or whatever, yeah, here's the... This is the FM radio tuner module. It's semi-surface mount because it's a surface mount component on a small board with these little notches cut out. It's not bad to put in. If you're worried about surface mount, this one's not bad. So, or not experienced enough with it, this is pretty easy to do. I'll show you. And the regular assortment of stuff you might expect. This, I believe, is the LED driver, and there are two of them. So, yeah, there are two spots for the LED drivers right below the LEDs. And that's it, a pretty straightforward bill of materials. Let me get the soldering iron heated up, and we'll start putting stuff together. We're going to start with the tuner module. Now, this, last time I had this, it wasn't in the Elenco kit, it was in another kit out of China. This is a little Philips all-in-one FM tuner. So the rest of the circuit board is really just about providing timing and control for selecting frequency and so on, and amplification, as well as the little light show at the top. All the smarts of tuning a signal and the regenerative or heterodyning or whatever you choose to build is all on this chip. So a person unfamiliar with radio theory is not going to learn anything from building this kit. That there are other kits that are better for that. That I still have one in the kit cabinet that I haven't built yet because it requires you to wind your own antenna coils, and I have bad memories of that from 50 years ago, so I have to overcome my internal hurdles before I try and do that again. I'll do it again I'll do that one in the next couple of weeks. Now we're going to line up this little mini board against the pads on the circuit board. Use my locking tweezers to hold it in place. Now there's a big, where's my pokey thing? There's a big space between the pads, so I'm not even going to put any flux between the pads. I'm sure bridging these pads will be danged near impossible, so I'm just going to go ahead and solder without laying the additional flux in. And now we've got one position soldered, so we can get rid of the locking tweezers. and put it up on my solder pad for a little anti-skid protection. And tilt that a little bit so I don't get quite as much glare in my eyes as I'm soldering. Of course, it's not working right now. I got to tilt it even further. There we go. Okay, that's all soldered down. Looks good. And the astute observer might have seen that I clogged that solder pad for the capacitor next to this inadvertently because I was going too fast. So I'll just suck the solder out of that. Perfect. Now, just because I am a little bit paranoid about this stuff, I'm going to double check the conductivity between the board and the mini board. Okay, now we're going to put all the resistors on the board, so I'm going to, as usual, speed up the cameras for this because resistor soldering is pretty generally uninteresting. The only thing to always keep in mind is if you're not sure of a resistor value, never hesitate to put it on your meter, because there's a couple of things. The paint might be bad, you might be misremembering, you might not have a great resistance calculator, whatever. Ultimately, when you put it on, why is this not reading at all? This is reading. Okay, I'm sorry. We were on manual, now it's on auto. Because the reality is the meter is the ultimate truth, and don't ever hesitate to use it. And now I've got all my cables all entangled. So again, fast motion and the resistors will go on. That's almost all the resistors, and we ended up with 4 spare 10Ks, 1 spare 1K, and a missing 10 ohm. Fortunately, in my bag, or in my box of resistors, I got plenty of 10 ohms, so we're fine. That's just a little hint too, just a little hint that if you're going to be doing, I mean obviously if you're going to be doing electronic work, you want to have spare parts or design parts, but if you're working on kits, you definitely need them a wide assortment, because you never know what's going to get left out, and it's nothing more frustrating for you or your young builder to be going through a kit and then be missing a common capacitor or a common resistor or even timing crystals. You can get bags and bags of them from eBay or Amazon relatively inexpensively, and they're just worth the investment. Now we'll put the 11 megahertz timing crystal on board. Crystals, like resistors and disc caps, are not polarized, And we're going to put some disc caps on. And one thing you'll notice here is the socket for the main microprocessor is, wait, oh, look at that. There's some pins are coming out of this socket, which is not good. And one looks like it's missing, but it's actually in my parts tray. So before I go any further, I'm gonna snug these guys down so they don't fall out, because that would make me sad. And as you can see in the tray, I put them in. Move this aside for a minute. There's the pin. You may be able to see it. It's silver against silver, so it may not be easy to see. So we will grab it up and put it where it's supposed to be, because we would be, again, sad if we didn't have all the pins. Another comment, of course, is you should also have a selection of sockets, pin headers, all kinds of things, because you never know what's going to turn up missing or damaged. So, but as I was saying, underneath the socket there are a couple of caps, the crystal, another electrolytic, and some resistors. So that's not a good thing or a bad thing, except you have to keep in mind that the disc caps, the two 22 picofarad disc caps we're going to be putting in here under the socket, can't be standing up, or else the chip's not going to clear them. So you're going to want to lay them down, and that means you've got to give yourself a little extra lead space so it lays down without straining the disc itself, the ceramic, and potentially, even though it would be very rare, damaging the interior of the disc cap, which would be bad. But again, it's unlikely that you'll ever do that. Even when I was a kid and being very good at breaking everything, while I tore apart many waxy caps, I was never able to successfully destroy a disc cap, just through rough use. If I took a pair of pliers to it, slip joint pliers to it, it'd break apart, but normal use it didn't. So I've laid those down. The other thing to think about with this part is there is a gosh, these pins are really I think no matter what the instructions say, I'm going to put this socket in very soon, because I'm all freaked out about the pins. Okay, so we've got some 104s. How many 104s? I've got 3 in the bin. And we'll see if we've got 3 on the board. This is that hole I plugged up before. Let's see if we can make the lead go through. Nope. It's not clear and wide enough. So I'll just apply a little thumb pressure to the back of it, heat up this side, and there it goes, right on through. So there's the disc caps on board, and we have one extra 22 picofarad. so our extra parts in the bag keeps growing. And now we're going to put this socket on, and first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to push down to make sure all the pins are as flush as we can get them. There we go. Now we'll check to see that they're aligned. They're all in a line. Notch going in the right direction. Now again, we've got a 4.7 microfarad electrolytic to go under here. I don't know why the author of the kit instructions isn't asking us to put that on now, because I'm going to put it on before I put this socket in. And again, I'm leaving probably 4 millimeters of leg space so I can fold this over. So I'm going to solder it down, and then I'm going to solder the socket down, and then fold it over. And I'm going to fold it over, make sure it fits, and then trim the leads, because no need to rush. So socket goes in, making sure we get all the pins right and they don't back out. More of an issue down at this end with pins not quite lining up. There we go. There we go. Nice and flat. And again, this is where we grab some locking tweezers just to hold the socket on the board while we tack down the legs. Let me get a long piece of solder. And there's the socket. Now we can fold this electrolytic over, and it fits, so I can trim the leads. Yeah, the electrolytic is a little more, if you don't have enough slack in the legs, you'll pull against, and you fold it over, you'll pull against the bottom, and you could damage it or loosen the connection between one of the leads and the foil inside the cap. Oops, one pin bent. Then 200 microfarad caps. Here, same thing, they're bend overs. So we'll bend them over before, in this case I'm going to bend it over before we solder. Now we'll do the two LED controllers, and these have, to show which way they go, there's a slight, the corner is clipped on one end, and where the corner is clipped goes to the boxed or square pad on standard circuit board templates, silkscreen templates. And one thing to notice on this particular kit, if you happen to get it, is the two LED drivers face each other, so there's notch there, notch there. It's not notch here, notch here. Just be careful of the markings on the board. Now we'll put all the LEDs in. And again, I'm going to speed through this. I will do the rest of the electrolytics. Bunch of 4.7 microfarad scattered around the board. And these can apparently stand straight up and down. There's not going to be anything on top of them. Next is the power connector. Now for the power connector, I go up one diameter of solder to 40, 41, whatever, because I want to put a lot of solder on these connections, because this, let me get it aligned first. So to get it aligned, we tack it and look at it, use our thumb to press it against the circuit board flat, reheat the solder, and she's all flat. Now, as I was saying, this is a point of mechanical stress. These solder joints are what hold the connector to the circuit board, besides making electrical contact, and the power connector gets unplugged and plugged back in a number of times over the unit's life. So you want to make sure you overdo the solder a little bit, just to make sure that as it goes through its life of power removal and whatever, you don't have it come loose. An intermittent power connection, it probably would never break off, but it could theoretically become intermittent, and that'd drive you crazy. Now we'll put the pin header. This is going to connect this board to the display, and again, my technique for these pin headers is use your pinky finger or something else, thimble on the solder pad or whatever. Use your pinky finger and tack one pin, not paying any attention to whether this is parallel or whatever, or perpendicular rather. So now you can see it's a little off. So all we're going to do is eyeball it, heat that one leg, and there you go. Now it's all perpendicular, and you didn't have to fuss a lot. So just do one leg and then go back in, straighten it up, and then solder the rest of the legs. Our two non-momentary but our locking switches. I know one will be power. I don't know what the other one's going to be. Again, these don't have bends in the legs, so they don't lock in. So I'm going to use the same technique I was just talking about for the pin header, to make sure. Yeah, that's all. That settled in just fine anyway. I don't need to mess with that. So maybe, in another radio kit, two switches, one would be for band select, one would be power. But for this one, which is just FM, I don't actually know what it is. I haven't looked at it. I haven't looked at the schematic in depth. Yes, I am using every last millimeter of this piece of solder. If you went through as much solder as I did, you'd use every bit too. Now we'll do our momentaries, and these do clip in. so you don't have to worry about them coming loose while you're soldering or being misaligned. They line themselves up pretty dang well. Now we're going to put the antenna. He wants to put the antenna on now. Yeah, I guess we could do that. Double check our sizing, because I think this is shorter than the rest, and this is shorter than the rest. So we've got, okay, we got more than two. I thought there might be two, and then I'd say those are the antenna screws, but there are four. So those are not there, five. Then that means there must be six. Oh, I'll just put one of these. Well, no, I can't, because diameter's wrong. Okay, kids, when you pack the kit, you need to give me one small screw that goes through that hole, and they did not. I mean, you've seen everything that's come out of the bag since the start, and there is not a small screw and small nut for that. So, let me go over and grab my metric screw box, my small metric screw box. I think an M2 might fit through that hole. It sure does mount high, doesn't it? They have this big old pad to put it on, and they drilled the mounting hole way at the top instead of getting more of the base of the antenna connected, which would have been a better idea in my opinion. Give that some torque. Now we've been missing one resistor and we're missing one screw, so be prepared, have spares. And just because I want to do this, I'm going to lay some solder, see if I can get any adherence on this this chrome-plated antenna base. I don't think I will be able to. I usually have to grind the chromium off, but this does fill in the gap a little bit underneath the antenna, so it'll have more surface area connected, even if it didn't particularly weld. Next step is to actually attach the speaker, but I'm not going to do that now, and I'm not going to do the display board now. I have to go feed the cats, so that will be it for this evening. See you again tomorrow. And just a few more steps. We'll do the speaker now. Okay, now I know I have some whisker shorts here. In other words, one of the strands of wire from the red lead is touching the black lead, but I don't care right now. I'm going to solder them in first and then dress that up. Just because if I start fussing with it, it'll come out and I'll have to be chasing it around a little bit. Knowing that the short exists is half the issue. So there it is, and I'll get my little pokey thing and separate those two strands, and we're good. Now we'll go to the speaker itself, and yeah, if I had tinned these leads before I started attaching them to things, it wouldn't have the strands escaping. So I'll go ahead and tin these before I put them into the speaker. And one final piece of soldering. We're taking the LED display and we're going to put a pin header on the back to connect it to the main board. And obviously it's not a pre-cut pin header. So it's got 16 pins that we want to do, so we'll cut off the 2 extra at the end, and hopefully we will have the right amount of pin headers going through. And nope, I miscounted. I want to take one more off. And again, tack 1, let that set up, flip it over, take a look. It's not quite perpendicular, so we heat that solder up on the 1 pin, and now it is perpendicular and we can finish up. Now we can mate the LCD, the display, to the main board. Oops! First thing we want to do is we want to put the microcontroller on the board. We check the pins. They're splayed out a little bit, so I push them in a little bit all at once by pushing them against the side of my workbench. A technique I've been using a very long time and works very well to put even pressure on all of the pins in a rank. I want to go a little bit further in. It may have been too far, but we'll see. Nope, that looks good. Seems to be all aligned even with the problematic socket pins that we had earlier. They seem to all be in safely. And we'll put the display in. And now it is ready to be powered up. Alright, I made sure the power button is out. Power connector in. Let's take the antenna up. And let's see which button powers it on. That one. Okay. So it has started up, as you can see. Now we're tuning. And let's volume up. I'm going to turn the volume up as far as it'll go. Goes up to 15. That push button didn't seem to do anything. I see the problem. And besides the controller, we want to put this little op amp in its socket too, or else there's not going to be any sound coming out of the little darling if it doesn't have amplification, and if it doesn't have a pin bent on this one. Let me see what I can do to fix it without pulling it back out. So all I really need to do is straighten it and aim it at that. Now I'm going to pull it back out. There we go. Now everything's in right. And we can put the display back on. And this comes with a power cable that connects to USB. Let me make sure the power is off. Power is off. Now we'll power it up. Yep. It clicked and the little LEDs blinked. which is good. I'm getting static, as you can probably hear. Let me... So that's volume at 1. So, yeah. Turn that off for a minute. So this apparently turns the the volume LED display on and off. One thing you notice is, gosh, it's loud. Yeah, at the highest level it distorts the speaker. So that's it. I guess I can go ahead and put together the case for it. I'm going to do that off camera because it's pretty boring. And I put the case together off camera because watching me peel protective foam paper off stuff and then screwing it all together is not that interesting. It's a typical Chinese kit case. They're fine, just if you get used to them. And again, it's a fine kit. Whoever puts this together will have a good time, and it's a good learning kit. Nothing particularly challenging in it, and you're not going to learn anything particularly new about circuit design or how electronics work, but it is a good beginner kit. And in the end, you have a radio that you can use. Now this, I'm going to start making this a regular part of these videos. Here's the extra parts that came with it. There are 5 extra resistors, 2 extra LEDs, 1 extra little audio amplifier, which is nice. I can use that. Extra cap, extra switch, and some screws and hardwares, and 1 disc cap. So make enough of these kits and you're going to have a great stockpile of spare parts. So that's this FM radio. Again, nothing new, particularly new and interesting in it, but it's an okay kit. Thanks for watching.